Chapter 3, Part 2. The trip down the staircase was made carefully, the spiral down being quite narrow in places, and without any kind of railing. It made sense for a being who could turn into shadows and fly, but for them, any wrong move could mean a long drop and a sudden stop. The guards did their job, though, and all ponies made it to the bottom safely. This just left one more door for Twilight to open. Repeating the previous process, which didn't seem quite so bad the second time now that she dusted off the old spell, Twilight sent a beam of dark magic towards the door and watched as it melted into the doorframe.
Careful,
Twilight warned as she cut off the magic spell, letting the dark magic fade along with her approaching migraine.
This door can go to a few places. It could be trapped.
All ponies watched with bated breath as the dark magic worked along the door's frame. Breathing all but stopped when the spell finally concluded, and the door swung open. It was quickly followed by a universal sigh of relief when nothing but a simple hallway was revealed on the other side.
This is new,
Twilight noted.
Last time there was a fear trap and a staircase to the roof.
Split into groups, go with an escort, pick a room and begin searching, Shining announced. I'm with Twilight. I go where she goes. Twilight hummed, peering into the dark hallway with a shiver down her spine. She sent a quick pulse of magic down the hallway as the others started to organize themselves, searching for any obvious traps that might do them harm. Nothing. With luck, Sombra thought that no pony would have made it this far. Or if they did, he'd already be dead. Which, of course, was the case.
I think the bottom right,
Twilight decided.
The indoor looks important. Let's leave that until last.
Fine with me, Shadowflare remarked. I'll be tagging along with your group if there's no issue.
None,
Twilight confirmed with a friendly smile.
Come on, let's see what Sombra's been hiding.
Twilight was the first one out into the hallway, Shining Armor staying close behind as they headed straight for the door in question. On reaching it, Twilight carefully placed her magic around the handle while staying vigilant for a trap. Once again, there was nothing. On swinging it open, her eyes widened as a large space made itself known. A very large space. One filled with all kinds of things. Art, statues, and, yes, books. Well, jackpot, Shining mused. That's... Crystal Shield muttered, trotting into the room and staring in sadness up at a large statue of an alicorn mare that Twilight didn't recognize. Queen Amore. This statue used to sit in a plaza near my home. Huh, Shining hummed, walking up alongside the young guard as the rest of the group began to spread out into the room. So that's her. She looks a lot like Cadence. Twilight also noted the family resemblance, glancing between the statue and Crystal Shield sadly. But it wasn't the only artifact in the room, which seemed to have been something of a treasure hoard, it appeared. Walking past the statue and further in, Twilight examined several more items of interest. A set of armor that looked like it was designed for the Queen, along with several smaller sets that were perhaps for elite members of the Guard. One of the paintings held a purple unicorn, one who was posing on a sofa on a balcony in what appeared to be a pre-Sombra Crystal Empire. Peering at the plaque, it was entitled, Radiance and Hope. If there was any doubt that they would find the history they were searching for, those doubts could now be laid to rest. Twilight looked away from the painting towards a book set atop a cloth cover that obscured something else beneath it. But looking at the book, her eyes widened as she realized it was a dark magic tome. Well, what's this doing here? Shadowflare mused, trotting up beside Twilight and also examining the book. An odd place to keep dark magic spells, don't you think?
Maybe he left it here by accident.
Which, of course, would mean he probably had a study or a library where he kept his magical secrets. Or both. I'll make sure the others know that this is here, Shadowflare assured Twilight. Go look around some more. I think I'm going to see what else can be found right here.
Start beneath the sheet,
Twilight suggested.
This is more than I imagined.
It is indeed. Twilight left Shadow Flare to it, walking back towards the door as she turned to examine the whole room with awe. So much history, so much research. She had such a big project ahead of her. She felt the huge grin morphing onto her features, the scholarly filly inside of her bouncing around in glee. There was an element of sadness, especially seeing ponies like Crystal Shield, but that just made it feel all the more alive. She couldn't wait to free it all from the depths of Sombra's sanctum. Celestia was going to love what Twilight had to report. Still, when she thought back on the dark magic tome they had just found, Shadow Flare was right about it being out of place. She had to wonder. Twilight backed out of the room as the rest of her group were busy cataloging their findings, moving out into the hallways and towards the door right at the end. She'd wanted to leave it until last, but now she was curious. She took hold of the handle and swung the door open, taking a step inside and looking around with wide eyes. Just as she'd hoped, the door had led right into Sombra's personal study. Doing a lap around the room in giddy awe, she saw the desk had Sombra's journal just sitting there. All of the king's thoughts as he waged his coup and campaign of domination. All of it was in those pages. And looking around the room, bookshelves contained more dark magical knowledge, which Twilight would have to bring before the princess for judgment. Busts of Sombra around the room that would most definitely go into a museum when all was said and done, and a blank wall? Twilight frowned, staring at the one completely sparse wall in confusion. The rest of the room had something going on with it, whether it be practical or purely for decoration. But this section of wall was completely blank, completely unassuming, and completely boring. Twilight smirked. If there was one thing she'd learned about Sombra when fighting him, it was that he loved his secret passages. Loading up that dark magical spell once more, Twilight let loose on the blank wall in the hopes that she was onto something. And when the dark magic and pain had ended, Twilight looked up to see that the wall had completely vanished. A door sat in its place. Twilight gave a loud squee, prancing for a moment before catching her enthusiasm and attempting to calm herself down. But she'd found it. Sombra wouldn't be able to hide anything from her. This is so exciting. Once again finding no traps, Twilight opened the door and stepped into the unknown. She was ready for anything. More dark magic knowledge, perhaps. Maybe a dangerous artifact in need of disposal, but this?
What?
The room beyond was nice? More than that, why was there a foal's cot? Looking around the room with her jaw hitting the ground and her mind all but flatlining, Twilight had to take several moments of rebooting to process what she was seeing.
Okay, so Sombra had a kid. Alright, fine, that's... What?
She had to take a moment to do the breathing technique that Cadence had taught her as a filly to calm herself. It was like everything she'd known about the Dark Mage had been turned upside down.
Okay, so, what can I find?
The cot was empty, which begged the question, what happened to the foal? Looking around the rest of the room, there was one empty chest with several more filled with children's toys from that era. Basic little things, not at all like a lot of what the fancy tech companies are producing for fools nowadays. A bookshelf also had ancient children's tales that... Actually, Twilight was pretty sure some of those tales had been lost to time. Exciting! Twilight coughed, not allowing herself to get distracted. Admittedly, she hadn't thought that she'd find lost children's stories in an evil sanctum, but hey, she wasn't going to say no to more research. But on to more pressing matters. There was a book on one of the chests. Moving closer to it, Twilight picked it up and read the title aloud.
The Chronicles of Fatherhood,
she muttered with a frown.
Sombra sure loved dramatic titles, didn't he?
She was still finding it hard to imagine that shadow monster as a father. Opening it up to the first page, Twilight peered at the first words on the page before proceeding to read the opening paragraphs. Sombra's own words. I have a son. In truth, this journal is quite the impromptu project. I never intended for it, but I must admit at being at a small loss. With my mistress's pregnancy, I had long contemplated the coming fatherhood I was to experience. Creating life rather than ending it is a new prospect, but one I didn't think too much of at first. After all, the coming war with the royal sisters was far more important. But now, he will be the heir to all I have built. My legacy, one destined to take hold of this kingdom when the time is right. My progeny will reign for 1,000 years, and another 1,000 after that, all through rock and metal and time. By throne, by slaves. It all shall be his. Once the royal sisters are either dead or enslaved with the rest of our foes. And yet, what if I fail? Are we destined to become two corpses in one grave? That cannot be allowed. A son. Sombra had a son. And he'd been worried for his future. Maybe the son had been sent away alongside his mother. Maybe Sombra's family line still continues. Maybe... A flicker of movement was caught right in the corner of Twilight's eye, and she turned in alarm to face whatever she'd just seen. She didn't even get a chance to scream as a massive shadow leapt from the doorway and latched onto her face. She fell backwards, thrashing as she lit her horn and tried to pry the creature from her. But no matter how hard she seemed to pull, the thing was determined not to budge. This had to be a trap she'd missed. She just had to... The creature wrapped a shadowy tendril around her horn, stopping any further buildup of her magic. To make things worse, Twilight's heart sank as she felt a probing around her mouth, almost like it was trying to get inside. No! She screamed internally, falling back onto her rump and resorting to trying to pry it off with her hooves. But if her magic had failed, her hooves weren't going to do anything. She couldn't see a thing, and was trying desperately hard to keep her jaw clamped shut. But with her nose covered by the shadow, oxygen wasn't being introduced into her system. Her head started to feel light, and a whole new darkness overtook Twilight as she collapsed to the ground and into unconsciousness. Now the shadow could begin its work. It slacked, simply opening up the mare's mouth and crawling its way inside. Once it had access, the mass began to spread itself upwards and towards her brain, swirling around inside Twilight's head until it found a comfortable spot. Then the shadow melted away, seeping into a deep part of Twilight's mind and into dormancy. Twilight began to come to, giving a groan as she began to process what had happened. She was on the floor?
What?
The mare tried to recall how exactly she'd found herself in such a position. She'd been examining Sombra's journal about fatherhood and then... nothing. Rising up, she saw movement from the doorway as her brother hurriedly entered the room and fixed her with a look of concern. "Twilight!" Shining shouted, crossing the room and reaching her quickly. "You disappeared, and we didn't know where you went. And then we heard something coming from in here and... What happened?"
I don't know. I think...
It was still foggy, but a small voice at the back of her mind was saying, "Yes, that was it."
I fell. Hit my head. I didn't mean to worry you, BBBFF.
Shining sighed, looking around the room and only now taking in the sight. Huh? Twilight, what is this? Twilight took a look back across the room herself, getting back on track. Sombra's son. He had a son. Maybe If she could find out where his family was to that very day, it would be a huge historical breakthrough.
I'll explain later,
Twilight said to him, taking the journal and gently placing it into one of her saddlebags.
but I think we just hit upon something incredible.